Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last Curiosita session for the year 2019. Strange, I feel I just joined DaVinci. And we are very pleased that there are some regular faces here. We hope we have been successful in making you curious. That's why you came over and over again. We have this afternoon our executive responsible for insight and strategy, Marla Koonin, who is going to kick off and provoke us as Ben normally does.
Thanks, Prof. Hi, everyone. So I think the idea, as many of you that are regulars know, is this concept around trying to throw out an idea and get people to engage a little bit with this idea, with the intention that hopefully as thought leaders in this country, we are provoking thought, and at some point I would like to see some of these becoming, critical papers and aspects that can really provoke a wider audience. So I was chatting with one of the senior professors at UNISA, and she brought up this concept about Ubuntu leadership again, which is something that I'm quite interested in. And I posed a question and I discussed with her, and we actually said we want to publish a paper on this, so I guess I'm being a bit selfish by throwing it out there. I don't have the answers and I don't have the anything, but I'd like us to probe something that's been sort of on my mind. And that is, we're speaking and gearing up so much about what we at DaVinci term the fifth industrial revolution. We think we've definitely revolutionized beyond the fourth industrial revolution. And the idea around the contribution that Africa can and should make to this. And I read a very interesting piece which was put out into the market by Investec. I saw an article written on it, and then it got me thinking around some of this. And it was around the fact that if you are a continent that is already not able to offer basic services such as electricity, food, and resources to a large portion of the population, is it possible for us to, number one, use the fifth industrial revolution to revolutionize some of those changes? So, for example, in Rwanda, they've done some incredible work around bringing access to people in far and remote rural areas. So the question would be, so if we've got all this technology to play with, is it a capitalistic notion, technology, and can it only be accessed by people that have access? Or is it something that can become accessible to those who really don't have in communities? Because my main interest is actually around what part is Africa going to play and contribute in the fifth industrial revolution. And for those of you who know some of my feelings, and that is around humane leadership. And I believe that humane leadership is going to play a huge role, which is that you can't evoke people to be innovative and creative if you aren't someone who is trusting and connects with people and partners with people. Which leads me to my last thing, which is around Ubuntu. And that is, if Ubuntu as a principle is about interconnectedness, could we not utilize Ubuntu leadership to actually be our contribution as Africa to the fifth industrial revolution and this concept of humane leadership? So I haven't really asked a question, but it's more around, in your view, do you, number one, believe that with the limited resources that some people in our societies have, what role can the fifth industrial revolution play? And second of all, do you believe that Ubuntu can actually play a role as a major role player as one of our contributions from Africa? So I'll open the floor just to your thoughts on this and opinions.
Floor is open.
Anyone? Come on, Heather, don't disappoint me today. I'll do a Ben. I'll start pointing out people that...
Maybe you can kick off by asking Marla why she's talking about the fifth industrial revolution. I think that should be a good starting point.
We could, but I've had that conversation.
Yeah.
So I was actually very interested on your topic of humane leadership to see the quotes, media responding to President Cyril Ramaphosa about that gender-based violence is actually against the values of Ubuntu and nurturing our communities. And I was thinking about, is that valid and is that true? Because seeing strength as a resource rather than superiority and how people play with that. And it was the first time I've heard those two things positioned that way. Because I think real strength is evident in gentleness, because gentleness is strength under control. But it was very interesting to hear Ubuntu linked with gender-based violence and thinking about the implications of that.
And linked to that, I mean, for me, I'm speaking quite in an organizational context about Ubuntu leadership linked to things like interconnectedness, partnerships. So I know we've had brief discussions around the management of technology, which is what our guest speaker is going to speak to us quite a bit around today, about how people are so systemic and such an important part of that. So I guess that's part of the question, but I was wondering, if you don't have basic resources, electricity, food, healthcare, do you believe that some of the aspects of the fourth or fifth, whichever industrial revolution you want to speak to, could actually, or technology could actually impact communities that don't have anything in a real way? Because the reason I say that is one of the examples I saw used was about mobile banking and how people can now access banking, for example, who'd never had the opportunity to. And whilst I understand that, I wonder if that would really catalyze their life to change healthcare and those aspects. And I mean, we spoke a little bit about medical stuff and access to that and agricultural aspects. So I guess that's more what I'm also probing is, do you believe that if you don't have basic resources, that this revolution can, and the advancement of technology and the interface between people and technology can actually still impact communities that have so little?
So this holiday, and drove off Google Maps. We went on that kind of holiday. And while I was sitting there, it was at the time we were talking about tablets in schools, and it was in the State of the Nation address after the elections. And I was wondering about how is the fourth industrial revolution impacting. And a Netstar guy drove up. And we were talking about the cross-border technology and the tracking of cars and how that has changed the information flows in his community.
But I want to challenge you that that's someone who's got access to a vehicle, who's got access to petrol. I'm speaking about people that have access to nothing.
Generally, people in Africa, if you look at the cell phone penetrations, that Africa actually has the largest cell phone penetrations. And that means the majority of those cell phones are actually smartphones. And it doesn't matter what scale or band or LSM that they sit in. And what happens is that because they have that mobile phone, they have access to the technology. And it's technology that makes an impact on their lives. If you look at Africa right now, there's a company called MFS Africa that's providing financial services for schools, particularly in Quintile 1, Quintile 2, and they're able to transact across borders in Africa. Medical health, we're looking at agribusiness. Smallhold farmers are now able to basically get equipment, get capital-intensive help because of mobile, because of technology. So it does, I believe.
So now that's exactly what I wanted to hear, because this is exactly some of the stories that I've read. But the question, therefore, that I'm asking as a second tier is, how can we make sure that the world sees our contribution, that you don't only see the northern hemisphere debate, etc., that our southern hemisphere debate can really be brought to the fore?
Thanks, Marla.
Prof.
I want to start off at the point of what's our core responsibility. And if we say one of them is research, the problem that we have in Africa, research in Africa, and particularly in Southern Africa, and especially in South Africa, is us, the researchers, are to blame. Because the moment we look at a theoretical framework, theory, philosophy,
Yes.
then we borrow. We borrow from the north or the west. We do not know our own philosophy. We do not know that there's a philosophy like Ubuntu. We haven't read into it to know exactly what's the principles. We may know the literal translation of the word Ubuntu, but we don't know what's the principles. And in this regard, as just mentioned, Africa is the largest market for services, for goods, etc.,
Agreed.
as we move into the future. So as researchers, we have a responsibility to unpack and understand what we mean by Ubuntu, to use this philosophy when we train students to regard it as the theory that is going to underpin this business of humanity, being humane, but how do we relate to each other? So even in business, where's the relationships? Where's the stakeholder relationships? All of this can be unpacked from the theory of Ubuntu.
Yeah.
So I think we have core responsibility to ensure that our students, yes, you can refer to seminal works, from anywhere, but what would be the underwriting or the underpinning philosophy and theory that we use? We've got to ensure that our students first understand what Ubuntu is about, what are the principles, and how it can relate to business. Because as long as we continue with the borrowing of philosophies and theories from the North and the West or the East, for example, we're not going to give Africa a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time, as you say, that Africa assumes a place in research literature, for example, in terms of how do we provide leadership looking at our own philosophy, our own theory, and our own theory development.
Yes. And I think, Prof, you've made it, Albertina, in terms of a very valid point, because that's exactly, so my initial research led to this concept of humane leadership, and then I kept thinking, but if there's this concept all around, why am I seeing nothing published on Ubuntu as a form of humane leadership? Because it 100% is. And I think that you've hit the nail on the head around too much research, in my view, obviously this is my own perception, is around the fact that it's very theoretically based and it's not applied, and it is not always applied in a specific context. And I think that if we could see much more, and so as a challenge to everyone, a lot more research coming out that focuses on what we do really amazingly, not only trying to borrow from others to kind of bleed into our work, but to actually see contributions out of our own spaces. That's what I hope to see, and that's what I hope DaVinci positions ourselves going into 2020. That is what we want to position, to try publish as much as we can on an African perspective of the Fifth Industrial Revolution, not this whole, international perspective only. Right.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, first of all, the trouble with Ubuntu is that we don't practice it ourselves yet. And I think our guest speaker this afternoon will tell us where the conflict is in our society, right here and now, between what we actually do and the philosophy of Ubuntu, which we don't practice.
Well, I want to challenge you a bit on saying we don't practice it. Perhaps it's on a national scale, but I've seen amazing work in communities where I see it working, so perhaps not in line with Fourth Industrial Revolution and organizational leadership, but I've seen it work incredibly in smaller communities and in other communities where I've seen it really, there is incredible examples, but perhaps not at a strategic level. So that's just
Not at a national level. South Africa isn't characterized by being an Ubuntu society, which it should be, which we want it to be. So we've got a lot of work to do to
if you think, basically it was, the concept was coined in the context of public service. That's, we wanted to change the whole way we deal with people and deliver service. But businesses have paid lip service to this.
Ubuntu means botobaha. It means I honor you, you honor me, right?
Yes.
And it's something that you grow up with within your households, within your family.
Like inherent within you.
It's inherent within you, and therefore we are all raised with it. And when you take your upbringing into your education, into your professional life, the expectation is that the principles that you were born and raised with will continue. The question then becomes, where did you
lose them? I agree.
As we become capitalists,
yes.
as the world becomes savagery, then perhaps we stepped out of what we originally knew. But as Africans, that's how you were raised. If you look tribalism, if you look at different cultures, I've never not experienced Ubuntu. It has been maybe the Western cultures that have come into Africa, and then we've allowed them to do business in the way that they operate. But if you go to the US, you're forced to operate how they operate, right? And it should be the same in Africa. TIA, this is Africa. You should operate how we as Africans operate. So the onus is on us to teach people on what Ubuntu is, and it should be inherently in us, I think.
I love that. I've now found my co-author on the paper. No, but I think you've made an exceptionally good point in terms of the question maybe is not, is it there? It's where did we lose it along the way? And have we lost it? And how can we bring it back if it is lost in certain sectors and environments, etc.? And also, how do you imprint it into organizational culture? Because that's my own area of interest. And for me, it's about, so if individuals all come collectively with something, how do we imprint that culture into everybody's identity onto an organizational culture, an organizational identity, and make sure that the organizations actually can bring that out? So that's something that's of interest as well. Okay.
Marla, can I ask you 2 questions?
Sure.
It's quite interesting. Thanks. It's my first attendance here. I'm just listening to the topic. Generally speaking, if you look at the world and Africa and South Africa in particular, South Africa is mainly a consumer market, consumer-driven market. They don't create things. So let's get back. You want to, in terms of your purpose and what you want to do, because that's where it starts, you want to provide basic service to people in remote places, be it Africa, South Africa, anywhere. But it goes far beyond that. Because when you provide basic services, I'd like you to expand a little bit more on what do you mean by humane leadership? Because Africa typically suffers from critical leadership. They don't have leadership. So if I go back and look at where we're sitting currently, because we want to address the world, but we have to start at home. And I like what you said earlier. Ubuntu is part of us. We know how to respect and we know how to care for one another and do things. But at the end of the day, unless you produce and create, unless you change your mindset, and that's what I talk to you about. Can you expand more? What do you mean by humane leadership?
So a few months ago, one of the debates that we raised was around this concept of, in the 4th Industrial Revolution, if technology plays a major role, what aspects will remain? And that would obviously be the humanness that would remain within that space. So part of that was around that what type of leaders would be needed in that type of an environment. And the discussion was that even though they have to be innovative and creative leaders, etc., that would be someone who practices a form of humane leadership, so embracing individuality, and in order to unleash people's potential to be innovative and creative, you have to create organizational cultures and climates that are trust-based, that enhance people's loyalty to organizations so that you can unleash that within them. So from that perspective, we spoke about the fact that the leaders of a 4th Industrial Revolution or a 5th Industrial Revolution would be people that understood this concept of being a humane leader versus that whole carrot and stick approach of, you'll do this now, not to do that. Or if you look back at some of the old models of leadership, where it was very much, if you look at them, it's at sort of a factory line where it's like, you will do this now at this time, etc. So to really unleash that, it was just a debate that we had around the need for humane leadership. So that's why I was taking a little bit step further, because I'm quite interested in how we can come with an African voice. And I wondered if Ubuntu is a way that we could bring a different style of leadership that hasn't been discussed throughout the world, because they're speaking a lot to this concept of humane leadership. If you look at some of the international papers that have been published around this concept, they keep speaking to this concept of humane leadership. So I was just wondering if we could put a different spin on it and call it Ubuntu leadership and bring that as part of our contribution to this.
Yeah, so, I think, one can call it anything. At the end of the day, you're looking at true leadership. You're looking at transformational leadership in the mind. Because people can do things, and unless it's not self-enrichment, you will not win the battle. So it goes back to your core in terms of humane leadership. Ubuntu, the 5th Industrial Revolution, can play an important role in helping people to change. The point I want to make is that unless we affect people's mindsets, typically in terms of what their purpose is in life, how can they go forward, you won't address it because they don't understand it. All these fancy words we talk about, it's fantastic. Even the 4th Industrial Revolution, people don't understand it.
I agree.
Even the 5th Industrial, people don't understand it. So we throw this jargon around, it's fine. It ends if we come back to what do you do at home? Where does it start? So for me, in terms of making a meaningful contribution in terms of be it the 4th or the 5th Industrial Revolution, we can talk about it just now and expand more on the 5th. I know much more about the 4th Industrial Revolution. For me, it's true transformational leadership. When I talk about it's servant leadership. So Ubuntu touches on those principles.
Absolutely.
It touches on those principles, but it does not pull out the purpose. Because you can do anything if you have a desire to, and if there's something that says, hey, what can I get out of this?
And I think what you're saying that's very interesting is also about accessibility. So making sure that if people are working within various communities, that they also bring the accessibility of all these aspects to communities.
So the lady over there, the lady spoke earlier about everybody's got smartphones. Doesn't matter where you go. In the world, they got the first thing that has a smartphone. And the fourth industrial revolution is smack bang in that era of using smartphones, where you look at the digital era, look at cryptocurrencies, for instance. You looked at moving away from the banking industry.
Yes.
And I'm particularly will speak against the banking, because the banking industry keeps you poor until you die. They feed you, they give you 4% beer, and they keep your money. So we're all slaves to the central banks. And that's how we were raised. We've been indoctrinated by the banking societies. When it comes to digital era, it takes the bank third party out of it. It's me and you doing business. I don't need a broker, I don't need a financial advisor. I can decide my money, and I can pay you without going through the bank. So first of all, you're addressing a very serious subject in terms of opposition when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution, because they don't like it. They're not part of it. And secondly, the most important, the government's not part of it because it's decentralized. They can't touch them. It's decentralized. So I've listened now 2 weeks ago when Cyril was with the BRICS 5, and they want to develop their own cryptocurrency in the fourth industrial revolution. So looking at that, to see how can they empower people more, instead of feeding them and giving that 4% and they take the money, and they owe you until you die.
Yeah.
So we sitting around a table here has got the huge responsibility, first of all ourselves. How do we transition? That's the most difficult part of it. It's a mindset change. It's not about the money, it's about the mindset change in terms of how we've indoctrinated to what you can do for yourself, and then how do you bring it across into Africa and the world as a bigger part. But for me, if you want to succeed, transformational leadership plays an important part in extracting the purpose of people. Once you get the purpose, it's a pleasure, a passion. They do whatever they need to do, because now they can take care of business and they can provide the basic services. But until they can do that, you are telling people what to do. And it's never worked. Autocratic leadership has never worked.
Approach.
So servant leadership is coming back to transformation leadership as part of humane leadership. But that should be the core in extracting the purpose, so people can see where they go. And yes, it can be done. Because when you do that, you ask people questions. You establish where they want to go, what's their purpose, where they want to be. And when they establish the desire and you get that burning to do something, to actually get something done that's intrinsic and it actually makes a meaningful difference in people's lives, I believe you can actually move far.
Yes.
You can move far ahead with it. So yes, these terms are fantastic, but you need to get to the core of it.
So I think these are really interesting points, and I mean, this I find fascinating. So for me, I hope that what we do from this is that all of us start to contribute and find our own niches to work within. As you know, the idea of these is not to find an answer, a solution, is to probe a problem and then to bring it up again. I mean, you've now given me another topic that I think we should start debating going forward. But today we have two stars of our show, coming to present to us. So I'm going to wrap the debate up there to say just the message really was about, I hope to see more and more research coming from an African perspective and not so reliant, as Prof has raised, about bringing in from north and west theoretical foundations, or alternatively, because transformational leadership is a theory that stemmed from there, to speak about now how can that then be applied within an African context. So that's what I really hope to see coming forward.